"You'll never be a real parent, Rachel." The words sliced through the family barbecue like a blade, silencing conversations at 3 different tables as my mother delivered her verdict with the cold precision she reserved for family members who had disappointed her most profoundly. Some people just aren't meant to have children, and pretending otherwise is just setting yourself up for heartbreak. I stood frozen by the potato salad, holding the serving spoon, while 32 relatives processed my public humiliation in uncomfortable silence. What Mom didn't know was that in exactly 3 weeks, I'd be sitting in a courtroom listening to Judge Patricia Williams read aloud the adoption decree that would make me the legal mother of 2 children who had already been calling me Mama for 18 months. Share this if you've ever been told you weren't enough for something you knew you were born to do. This story's for everyone who's ever had to prove their worth to people who should have seen it first. My name is Rachel Thompson. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent the last 5 years becoming a mother through foster care, while my family treated every milestone like a phase I'd eventually outgrow. What they saw as playing house with other people's children, I knew was the calling that had shaped my entire adult life. The Thompson family had very specific ideas about what constituted legitimate parenthood, all of which centered around biological relationships and traditional family structures that followed predictable patterns. My parents, Michael and Susan Thompson, had raised 4 children in suburban Sacramento through what they considered the proper sequence: marriage, homeownership, pregnancy, and child rearing that created families bound by blood relation, P.S., and shared genetic heritage. This philosophy had served my siblings well throughout their adult lives. My older brother Mark, 37, had married his college sweetheart immediately after graduation, purchased a house in the same neighborhood where we'd grown up, and produced 3 children who looked exactly like younger versions of our family photos. His progression from wedding to first child had taken exactly 2 years, following the timeline our parents considered appropriate for responsible family planning. My sister Jennifer, 31, had followed an even more accelerated path by meeting her husband through church, marrying within 18 months of their first date, and becoming pregnant during their honeymoon. Her twin boys represented everything our parents valued in family creation: planned conception, biological relationships, and rapid achievement of parenthood that confirmed her natural maternal instincts. My younger brother David, 28, had recently married his longtime girlfriend, and was already discussing pregnancy timing with our parents during family dinners that included detailed conversations about genetic health, fertility planning, and the importance of creating biological legacies that would carry forward family traits and characteristics. Then there was me, the daughter who had reached 34 without marrying, had purchased a 3-bedroom house specifically to accommodate foster children, and had spent 5 years creating a family through adoption rather than biological reproduction. While my siblings produced grandchildren who shared our family's genetic makeup, I was raising children whose backgrounds, ethnicities, and family histories differed completely from our established family identity. "Rachel's always been different," became Mom's standard explanation when relatives asked about my family's situation. "She's very devoted to helping disadvantaged children, but it's not the same as having your own kids, of course." The subtext was unmistakable. Rachel's choice to foster and adopt children represented charity work rather than genuine parenthood, and her childless status was being temporarily masked by involvement with other people's children, who would eventually return to their biological families or move on to permanent placements elsewhere. This perception had been reinforced consistently throughout my foster care journey. When I'd completed the 6-month certification process to become a licensed foster parent, my family had treated it like an interesting volunteer opportunity rather than preparation for parenthood. When I'd welcomed my first placement, a 3-year-old girl named Maya, whose biological parents were working toward reunification, Mom had offered to help babysit during my volunteer commitment. "It's wonderful that you want to help these children temporarily," she'd said while Maya was learning to call me Miss Rachel, and adjusting to the bedroom I'd decorated specifically for her needs. "Just remember not to get too attached, since she'll be going back to a real family eventually." Maya had been with me for 14 months, when her biological parents' rights were terminated due to their inability to complete court-ordered services and maintain stable housing. The judge had asked if I was interested in adopting Maya, and I'd said yes without hesitation, beginning the legal process that would make our relationship permanent rather than temporary. But my family's reaction to Maya's adoption had been complicated and conditional. They were happy that I was helping Maya by providing her with a permanent home, but they continued to treat our relationship as fundamentally different from the parent-child bonds that my siblings had created through biological reproduction. It's beautiful that Rachel rescued Maya from a difficult situation, Mom explained to friends who met Maya during family gatherings. She's giving that little girl opportunities she never would have had with her birth parents. The rescue narrative bothered me deeply because it mischaracterized both Maya's needs and my motivations for adoption. Maya wasn't a charity case who needed saving. She was a child who needed a permanent family, and I was a woman who had always known that parenthood was my calling regardless of how children entered my life. More troubling was how my family's rescue narrative affected Maya's sense of belonging and identity within our extended family. She was treated as a guest rather than a permanent family member, with relatives offering extra kindness and special attention that emphasized her outsider status rather than her place as my daughter and their new granddaughter, niece, and cousin. Maya is so lucky that Aunt Rachel found her, my nephew would tell other children at family gatherings, well-meaning but reinforcing the idea that Maya's presence in our family was temporary charity rather than permanent belonging. The second placement that would transform my understanding of family and challenge my relatives' assumptions about legitimate parenthood arrived 18 months after Maya's adoption was finalized. Rachel, we have an emergency placement that requires immediate response. My caseworker Jennifer Walsh had called on a Tuesday morning in March. 2 siblings, ages 4 and 6, removed from their home due to severe neglect and abandonment. They need temporary placement while we assess options for permanent custody. Emergency placements were typically shorter than planned placements, often lasting only days or weeks, while courts determined whether children could safely return home or needed alternative living situations. But something about Jennifer's tone suggested this case might be more complex than typical temporary custody situations. The children have been through significant trauma and will need experienced foster parents who can provide stability and therapeutic support, she continued. Given your success with Maya and your training in trauma-informed care, you were our first choice for this placement. I accepted immediately, preparing my home for 4-year-old Emma and 6-year-old James, siblings who had been living in a car with their mother for 3 weeks before being discovered by police during a welfare check. Their father was incarcerated on drug charges. Their mother was struggling with addiction and mental health issues that prevented her from providing adequate care, and extended family members had declined to take custody due to their own personal and financial limitations. Emma and James arrived on a Thursday afternoon with 2 garbage bags containing all their possessions, developmental delays that would require educational interventions, and emotional responses to trauma that would need professional therapy. Support. They were scared, confused, and desperately in need of adults who could provide safety, consistency, and unconditional care while they processed experiences that no children should ever endure. But what struck me most powerfully during their first week in my home was how quickly they began calling Maya their sister and asking if they could stay with us permanently. Despite everything they'd been through, Emma and James had an innate understanding of family bonds that transcended biological relationships and legal definitions of parenthood. Mama Rachel, can Emma and James stay here forever? Maya asked during bedtime stories 1 week after their arrival. I want them to be my real brother and sister. Sweetie, we're going to take care of Emma and James for as long as they need us to take care of them, I replied, already knowing in my heart that I wanted to adopt all 3 children and create the permanent family we were already becoming naturally. The legal process for adopting Emma and James would prove more complex than Maya's adoption had been. Their biological parents retained parental rights, and were enrolled in services designed to address the issues that had led to removal. Courts typically prioritize family reunification when possible, requiring foster parents to support biological parents' efforts toward regaining custody, even when children have formed strong attachments to their temporary caregivers. But after 8 months of supervised visits that were frequently canceled, service plans that were partially completed and then abandoned, and therapeutic assessments that documented the children's increasing stability and attachment in my new home, both biological parents voluntarily relinquished their parental rights rather than continue working toward reunification. Ms. Ray Thompson, Emma and James's biological parents have signed consent for adoption, my attorney David Kim informed me during a phone call that changed everything. They've acknowledged that they cannot provide the stability these children need, and they want them to remain with you permanently. The adoption process that followed involved home studies, psychological evaluations, court hearings and legal procedures that would establish my relationship with Emma and James as permanent and legally recognized. But the most significant aspect of their adoption was how it transformed my understanding of family and my confidence in my identity as a mother. Raising 3 children who had joined my family through adoption rather than biological birth had taught me that parenthood was defined by daily commitment, unconditional love, and consistent care, rather than genetic relationships or traditional family formation processes. Maya, Emma, and James were my children in every meaningful sense, and our family bonds were as strong and permanent as any created through biological reproduction. But my extended family's reaction to my growing family continued to reflect their belief that adoption was temporary charity rather than legitimate family creation. Rachel's house has become like an orphanage, I overheard Aunt Carol telling my cousin during Maya's 5th birthday party. She's got 3 kids now who aren't really hers. I hope she doesn't take on too many more projects. As if my children were volunteer commitments rather than the family I'd spent years building through love, legal processes, and daily parenting. That required the same sacrifices and commitments that biological parents made for their children. The most painful example of my family's conditional acceptance came during holiday celebrations where my children were treated as guests rather than permanent family members. While my siblings' children received elaborate gifts, inclusion in family photos, and references to all the grandchildren, Maya, Emma, and James were treated with polite kindness that emphasized their outsider status. These are Mark's kids, and Jennifer's twins, and David doesn't have children yet, Mom would explain when showing family photos to friends, making no mention of my 3 children, who were present at the same gatherings, and who called her Grandma with the same affection that her biological grandchildren did. The exclusion was subtle but consistent, and it hurt not just because it devalued my parenthood, but because it sent messages to my children about their worth and belonging within our extended family. Maya, Emma, and James were old enough to notice differences in how they were treated compared to their cousins, and they began asking questions about why Grandma Thompson seemed to love some grandchildren more than others. Mama, why doesn't Grandma put our pictures on her refrigerator like she does with Cousin Tyler and Cousin Madison? Emma asked after a family dinner where she'd noticed that Mom's kitchen displayed school photos of my siblings' children, but none of mine. Mama, are we not real grandchildren? James asked during bedtime after a holiday gathering where gift distribution had been noticeably unequal despite my siblings' attempts to compensate with extra presents for my children. These conversations broke my heart because they reflected my children's developing awareness that their place in our extended family was viewed as temporary or conditional rather than permanent and equal. Despite my efforts to provide them with stability and unconditional love, they were absorbing messages from extended family that their relationships were somehow less legitimate than those of children who shared biological connections to the heir parents and grandparents. The breaking point came during last summer's family barbecue, when my announcement about finalizing Emma and James's adoption was met with responses that revealed the depth of my family's misunderstanding about my identity as a mother and their identity as my legitimate children. That's wonderful that you're making it official, Jennifer had said when I shared news about the upcoming adoption ceremony. Those kids are so lucky that you're willing to take them on permanently. Lucky and take them on as if Emma and James were obligations I was accepting rather than children I was claiming as my own through legal processes that would caning firm relationships that already existed emotionally and practically. But Mom's response had been the most devastating and revealing about her true feelings about my family and my capabilities as a parent. Rachel, I need to ask you something honestly, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way, she'd said during a private conversation after other relatives had congratulated me on the upcoming adoption. Are you sure you're prepared for the long-term challenges of raising 3 children who come from such difficult backgrounds? Mom, I've been raising these children successfully for years. Maya's been with me for over 3 years, and Emma and James have been with me for 18 months. We're already a family. The adoption just makes it legal. But Rachel, these aren't normal children from stable families. They have trauma histories, behavioral issues, educational challenges. Raising them will be much more difficult than raising children who don't have those complications. The conversation that followed revealed the extent of Mom's concerns about my decision to build my family through adoption rather than biological reproduction. She worried that I was taking on responsibilities I wasn't equipped to handle, that the children's backgrounds would create ongoing problems I hadn't anticipated, and that my lack of experience with biological parenthood made me unprepared for the challenges of raising children with complex needs. Mom, every parent faces challenges with their children. The difference is that I went through months of training specifically focused on trauma-informed parenting, therapeutic interventions, and supporting children who have experienced difficult circumstances. I'm probably better prepared for parenting challenges than most biological parents. That's training, Rachel. It's not the same as natural maternal instincts that come from carrying your own children and understanding them from birth. Natural maternal instincts. The phrase that had haunted every conversation about my parenthood since Maya's first placement. Mom's belief that biological mothers possessed innate knowledge and capabilities that adoptive mothers couldn't develop through experience, education, and commitment. Mom, I have strong maternal instincts for my children. The fact that I didn't give birth to them doesn't diminish my ability to understand their needs, provide appropriate care, or love them unconditionally. But Rachel, you'll never really know if you're cut out for parenthood because you have no done right to and experience the full process of creating and raising your own biological children. The conversation had concluded with Mom's devastating assessment of my capabilities and future as a parent. You'll never be a real parent, Rachel. Some people just aren't meant to have children, and pretending otherwise is just setting yourself up for heartbreak. Real parent. As if 3 years of daily parenting, countless nights of comfort during nightmares, parent-teacher conferences, medical appointments, birthday celebrations, and the thousands of moments that define parent-child relationships didn't qualify as real parenthood because my children had joined my family through legal processes, rather than biological reproduction. That conversation had happened 6 weeks before the adoption hearing that would legally establish my permanent relationship with Emma and James, while providing them with the security and belonging they deserved as members of our family. The adoption ceremony was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Judge Patricia Williams's courtroom, with family members invited to witness the legal proceedings that would transform emergency foster placements into permanent parent-child relationships recognized by law and society. I had invited my parents, siblings, and several close relatives to attend the ceremony, hoping that witnessing the formal adoption process would help them understand the significance of what we were celebrating and the legitimacy of the family bonds we were establishing permanently. But the responses to my invitations had been mixed and revealing about my family's continued ambivalence about my unconventional path to parenthood. "Of course we'll be there to support you," Mark had replied, though his tone suggested obligation rather than enthusiasm about celebrating my growing family. Jennifer had accepted the invitation but asked if the ceremony would be emotional because she was concerned about how Emma and James might react to the formal legal proceedings. David had initially declined, citing work commitments, then changed his mind and agreed to attend after what I assumed were conversations with other family members about the importance of showing support. But Mom and Dad's response had been the most telling about their feelings regarding my family and their comfort level with publicly acknowledging my children as their grandchildren. "We'll try to be there if we can arrange our schedules," Mom had said when I called to invite them personally. "But these legal proceedings can be very lengthy and complicated. Are you sure the children need us there for something so bureaucratic?" Bureaucratic. As if the legal establishment of permanent parent-child relationships was administrative paperwork, rather than one of the most significant milestones in our family's development. "Mom, this adoption ceremony is as meaningful to our family as Mark's wedding was to his family, or Jennifer's children's births were to hers. Emma and James are becoming my legal children, and Maya is gaining legal siblings. This is a major celebration that I hope my parents will want to witness. Rachel, of course we support your decision to help these children. We just want to make sure you're prepared for the reality of permanent parenthood with children who have such complicated backgrounds." The morning of the adoption ceremony, I dressed Maya, Emma, and James in their favorite outfits, and explained that today was the day when a judge would make our family permanent through legal documents that proved we belonged together forever. "Mama, after today, no one can ever take us away from you?" Emma asked as I braided her hair in the bathroom mirror. "That's right, sweetheart. After today you'll be my daughter legally, which means forever. And I'll be your real son?" James asked from the doorway where he was adjusting his clip-on tie. "You're already my real son, James. Today just makes it official for everyone else to understand." We arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early to complete final paperwork and meet with our attorney David Kim, who would present our case to Judge Williams and request approval for both adoptions simultaneously. My family members began arriving 20 minutes before the scheduled hearing. Mark and his wife Jennifer attended with their 3 children, who were excited to witness their cousins becoming official family. Jennifer brought flowers for the children and a card congratulating me on making it official. David arrived. Ed with his wife and apologized for initially declining the invitation. But Mom and Dad were notably absent as the hearing time approached. "Ms. Thompson, we're ready to begin," Judge Williams's clerk announced as we gathered in the courtroom that would witness the legal transformation of our family structure. I looked around the courtroom one final time, hoping to see my parents entering through the doors that remained closed. Maya, Emma, and James sat beside me in the front row, dressed in their ceremony outfits and holding hands as we prepared to hear the judge's decision about our family's future. "Your Honor," Attorney David Kim began, "we're here today to request approval for the adoption of Emma Martinez, age 4, and James Martinez, age 6, by their foster parent Rachel Thompson, who has provided their care for 18 months, and wishes to establish permanent parent-child relationships." Judge Williams reviewed our case file, which included home study reports, psychological evaluations, references from teachers and therapists, and documentation of Emma and James' progress during their time in my care. "Ms. Thompson, please tell the court about your experience parenting Emma and James, and your commitment to providing them with permanent homes." I stood and addressed the court about the 18 months we'd spent building our family, the progress Emma and James had made in overcoming trauma, their strong bonds with Maya and me, and my commitment to providing them with the love, stability, and opportunities they deserved as my children. "Your Honor, Emma and James have transformed from scared, traumatized children into confident, happy kids who excel in school, participate in community activities, and have formed strong attachments within our family. They call me Mama, they call Maya their sister, and they've made it clear that they want our family to be permanent." Judge Williams asked Emma and James if they understood what adoption meant, and if they wanted me to be their legal mother permanently. Both children answered clearly that they wanted to stay with Mama Rachel and Maya forever. "Your Honor, based on the evidence presented and the best interests of these children, I'm approving both adoption petitions," Judge Williams announced. "Rachel Thompson is now the legal mother of Emma Martinez Thompson and James Martinez Thompson, with all the rights and responsibilities that permanent parenthood entails." The courtroom erupted in applause from my siblings, their children, and the court personnel who had witnessed the ceremony. Emma and James hugged me tightly while Maya jumped up and down with excitement about officially having the brother and sister she'd been claiming for over a year. But as we gathered for photographs with Judge Williams and celebrated with cake in the courthouse lobby, I couldn't help noticing my parents' continued absence from the most significant day in my children's lives and one of the most meaningful days of my own life as their mother. The phone call came that evening while I was tucking the children into bed and answering their questions about what it meant to have their names legally changed to Thompson, and to be my official children, rather than my foster children. "Rachel, we saw the courthouse posting about the adoption ceremony," Mom said, her voice carrying a strange mixture of emotions I couldn't immediately identify. "Congratulations on making everything official with Emma and James." "Thanks, Mom. We missed having you and Dad there to witness the ceremony." The kids asked where Grandma and Grandpa were. "Rachel, we need to talk about something important. Your father and I have been discussing your situation, and we're concerned about some things we've learned." My situation. As if becoming the legal mother of 3 children was a problem rather than a celebration. "What concerns, Mom?" "We did some research about adoption procedures and legal requirements, and we discovered that adoptive parents have the same legal responsibilities as biological parents. You're now legally obligated to support Emma and James financially until they're 18, pay for their education, provide health insurance, and handle any legal issues that arise from their behavior." The conversation continued with Mom explaining various legal and financial obligations that came with adoptive parenthood, as if I hadn't spent months working with attorneys, social workers, and court personnel to understand exactly what permanent parenthood would require. "Mom, I've been financially supporting Emma and James for 18 months already. I've been making decisions about their education, healthcare, and daily needs. The legal adoption just confirms responsibilities I've been fulfilling since they joined our family." "But Rachel, now it's permanent. You can't change your mind if the children develop behavioral problems, or if you discover you're not equipped to handle their needs long term." "Mom, I don't want to change my mind. These are my children. I want to be responsible for their needs and their futures permanently." "Rachel, that's what I'm trying to discuss with you. Are you really prepared to be a single mother to 3 children with trauma histories and special needs? Are you financially stable enough to handle college expenses for 3 kids? What happens if you want to get married someday and your husband doesn't want to take on children who aren't his biological offspring? The questions continued for 20 minutes, with Mom systematically challenging every aspect of my decision to adopt Emma and James and my capacity to provide appropriate long-term parenting for our 3 children. The conversation concluded with Mom's assessment that reflected her deepest concerns about my unconventional family and my capabilities as a parent. Rachel, I just hope you understand what you've committed to. Raising other people's children is different from raising your own, and you may discover challenges you didn't anticipate. Other people's children. Even after legal adoption, Mom continued to view Emma and James as temporary additions to my household, rather than permanent members of our family and her own grandchildren. But 3 weeks later, Mom's perspective would undergo a transformation that revealed the power of external validation in changing family members' assumptions about relationships they'd never fully understood or accepted. The phone call came on a Thursday evening, while I was helping James with homework and Emma was practicing piano in the living room. The caller ID showed my parents' number, which was unusual because they typically called on weekends during designated family check-in times. "Rachel, we need to tell you something important," Mom said, her voice carrying excitement and what sounded like amazement. "We just received a call from Judge Williams's office about the adoption ceremony." Judge Williams's office calling my parents made no sense to me, since they hadn't attended the ceremony and weren't listed as parties in the legal proceeding. GSL. "Mom, why would Judge Williams's office contact you?" "Because your adoption case has been selected for recognition in the county's annual Families of Excellence program. Judge Williams nominated your family for an award that celebrates successful adoptions and outstanding foster care outcomes." Families of Excellence was a program I'd heard about but never researched, designed to recognize adoptive families who had demonstrated exceptional commitment to children's welfare and successful family formation through adoption and foster care. "Judge Williams specifically mentioned your success with all 3 children and the stability you've provided for kids who came from very difficult circumstances," Mom continued. "The program coordinator called to ask if we would participate in a feature story about your family for the county newsletter. A feature story about our family that would be distributed throughout the county's social services network, highlighting our adoption success and recognizing the stability and love we'd created together." "Mom, that's wonderful recognition, but I'm not sure why they contacted you instead of calling me directly." "Because they wanted to interview grandparents about their perspectives on adoption and how extended family support contributes to successful placements. They specifically wanted to talk to us about how proud we are of your parenting and how fully we've embraced Emma and James as our grandchildren." The conversation that followed revealed the complete transformation in my parents' understanding of my family and their recognition of my success as a mother to 3 children who had joined our family through adoption rather than biological birth. "Rachel, we owe you an apology," Dad said after taking the phone from Mom. "We've been treating your children like temporary additions to the family, instead of recognizing them as our grandchildren and your permanent children. The county's recognition of your family made us realize how wrong we've been." The apology continued with both parents acknowledging that their concerns about my adoption decisions had been based on misunderstanding about adoptive families and prejudices about children who entered families through foster care rather than biological reproduction. "We did some research after the county called," Mom added. "We learned that adopted children have the same developmental outcomes as biological children when they're placed in stable, loving homes. We also learned that adoptive mothers show the same neurological responses and attachment patterns as biological mothers." The research had apparently convinced them that my maternal instincts and parenting capabilities were legitimate, rather than artificial substitutes for real biological motherhood. "Most importantly, we realized that Maya, Emma, and James are our grandchildren in every meaningful way," Dad concluded. "They carry our family name, they're being raised with our family values, and they love us the same way our biological grandchildren do." 6 months later, my parents' transformation was complete and permanent. They included Maya, Emma, and James in all family photos, displayed their school pictures prominently alongside those of their biological grandchildren, and bought them Christmas and birthday gifts that were equal to those they provided for Mark's and Jennifer's children. More significantly, they began introducing all 3 children as our grandchildren without qualification or explanation about adoption, and they spoke proudly about my parenting skills and the family I'd created through foster care and adoption. Rachel has done such beautiful work building her family. I heard Mom tell a friend during a phone conversation I accidentally overheard. Maya, Emma, and James are thriving children who are so lucky to have found such a dedicated mother. We're incredibly proud of the family she's created. The validation felt wonderful, but what mattered most was seeing Maya, Emma, and James finally receive the unconditional acceptance and equal treatment from their grandparents that they deserved as full members of our extended family. Mama! Grandma Thompson put our pictures on her refrigerator, Emma announced excitedly after our next family dinner. Right next to Cousin Tyler's soccer picture, and she asked me about my spelling test scores, James added. Just like she asks the other grandkids about school. The children's joy at being recognized as legitimate family members by their grandparents was a powerful reminder of how deeply children are affected by extended family acceptance or rejection, and how important it is for adult family members to model inclusive love rather than conditional belonging. 2 years later, our family has continued to thrive and grow together. Maya is excelling in 3rd grade and has developed into a confident, compassionate big sister who takes pride in helping Emma and James navigate childhood challenges. Emma has overcome most of the developmental delays that resulted from her early trauma, and is now performing at grade level in kindergarten. James is thriving in 2nd grade and has discovered talents in art and music that we're nurturing through lessons and creative activities. Most importantly, all 3 children understand that they are loved unconditionally, that their place in our family is permanent and secure, and that they have extended family members who are proud to claim them as grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and cousins. Our adoption story has become a source of pride for our entire extended family, and Maya, Emma, and James are treated as full family members in every context, rather than special additions who require extra explanation or consideration. If you've made it this far, drop chosen in the comments if you understand that families are built through love and commitment rather than just biology. The lesson I learned from my family's initial rejection and eventual acceptance of my children wasn't about adoption, foster care, or alternative family formation. It was about the difference between seeking approval for your life choices and living authentically according to your values regardless of whether others initially understand or support your decisions. For years, I'd wanted my family to recognize my maternal instincts, my parenting capabilities, and my children's legitimacy as full family members. Their conditional acceptance had been painful because it suggested that my family was somehow less real or valuable than families created through traditional biological reproduction. But the most important realization was that my children's worth and my identity as their mother didn't depend on extended family validation. Maya, Emma, and James were always my real children. Our bonds were always legitimate, and our family was always complete regardless of whether others recognized those truths. External recognition was wonderful when it came, but it didn't change the daily reality of our relationships, or the love that had defined our family since the first day each child entered our home. The most meaningful validation came not from county awards or family acceptance, but from my children themselves, from Maya's pride in being a big sister, from Emma's trust that I would always be her safe person, and from James's confidence that our family would always be his home. Tell me about a time when you had to build something meaningful despite others questioning whether you were qualified or capable. How did you maintain confidence in your path when people you loved doubted your choices, and what would you say to someone whose calling isn't recognized by their own family?